Hello, John, Graham, and I.
Hi, Leah.
We're here today. We're going to be talking a little bit about the incel community, just a little bit.
Just a little bit. There's a lot to cover, though.
So we're not going to do that.
A very interesting, cultish, confusing group of people.
So how long have you heard about the community, John?
Well, you told me about incels probably a few months ago when I was on The Bachelorette and on Paradise. I remember we were having a conversation about the incels and how one could identify as like a Chad, or one could identify as an incel who doesn't get a lot of sex because they blame the world on their society. And people might place me, looking at me, they might want to place me in some certain group. But I have an interesting background.
People like to do that.
Yeah, people like to stereotype.
And so how they were to stereotype you, how would you react to that? And because of your background, how would you react to it?
Yeah, I think the stereotypes on me, I guess there's two sides of the coin you could look at. So for those listening, a Chad is someone who is very sexually successful with women because he's good looking and muscular.
Or they think, or an incel thinks they are.
Or an incel thinks they are Chad. And then an incel, on the other hand, would be someone who is not sexually successful with women and wants to be
involuntarily
celibate. That's right. Incel. And they blame the world and society for their unsuccess. And
unsuccess, too.
Yeah. Unsuccess. Yeah. And so I think if one were to look at me, they could see two sides, like a more nerdy software engineer of Asian background who, is not the typical homecoming king white guy jock. So one could classify me as an incel. And then there's another side that you could classify me on, which is someone who's been on TV and someone who likes to exercise and is in decent shape. So you could classify me on the outside as a Chad. And I think there's like...
So you're a nerd Chad. You're a nerd incel hybrid Chad.
Nerd incel hybrid Chad who's just trying to have a good discussion about all this, because I think a lot of people, of these guys, are just sexually frustrated and blame the world for their problems.
Yeah, but it's a real problem to them. It's, the way they approach problem solving might be...
Yeah, totally. And I'm a guy, I've survived my teens, and I'm 29. I've almost survived all of my 20s, and I know what it's like to, have hormones and testosterone that you can't control, and you want to have experiences that you may not be having. And I've been in situations like that before where I've been frustrated, and the last thing that I feel like they should be doing is blaming the world for their problems and hoping women sort of give themselves up for sex whenever they so please.
And you were, of course, born a Chad and eligible for a quick bit on The Bachelorette. You were born that way, right? You were born with a six-pack, 6 months old, right?
That's one of the craziest things. So incels think that Chads have genetic superiority. So they're born super athletic and attractive and everything works out for them. I was born super chubby. I was overweight for most of my life, or majority of my life, and I was picked on and teased, and if anything, I was the guy who was probably more sexually frustrated and extremely unsuccessful in the ladies department. I didn't have my first kiss until I was in college, and I was 19 years old.
That's not unusual at all. It's rather unusual to have I don't know what these guys are thinking about exactly when they see someone and just judge from their physical appearance. But just because you're walking down the street with someone of a different gender or the same gender, it doesn't mean you're having sex with them. But quite often they start out saying, I saw this morning a Chad and a Stacy, or sometimes they'll even say, I saw this guy, he was short, he was Asian, he was with a Stacy, she's just using him, I'm sure. The assumption level is pretty much the roof with incel posts.
Yeah, I think I was astounded about how much discussion there is and how much frustration and anger there is about their sexual lives. And if you go to incels.me, which you showed me, I saw a forum, it had over 200 or 300,000 comments from these incels who are blaming the world and frustrated and take their problems out on society, and they have developed their own language almost, and they have so many acronyms and words to describe different characters in
Well,
this
that helps feed the community
regime.
and keep it kind of fun and fresh for them and their depression or however they're dealing with it. But one of the problems is that it's a rather negative community, which anyone that's read or interfaced with incels a little bit, they know it's kind of bleak place in the world. And they're actually radicalizing each other. So it seems every year or so it's getting worse and a lot darker, a lot more black pill, as they say.
Yeah, and I think it's a snowball effect a little bit, where one person describes their frustrations and another person's like, oh, I've been wanting to have sex. I'm 15 years old. I'm going to latch onto this community because I also would like to have sex with a female.
You think you had it bad? I had to walk uphill both ways to school. No,
Yeah.
You had a school? Oh,
And
I never even had a school. I went to class in a shoebox. Try to top each other.
It's the weirdest
incel experience.
And they just commiserate with each other. Like one of the comments I read where I saw a woman walking down the street and she didn't immediately drop everything and have sex with me. What? So backwards.
Today I was walking down the street and I saw a person that didn't just drop everything and hand me their credit card and wallet.
Yeah.
And I'm really, I should start a forum like involuntarylybroke.com. And just blame it on these, banksters that aren't giving me their, PIN numbers and their card. I need to do that.
Right. And I think the incels feel so entitled to things that they shouldn't be. Like
someone else's body?
Right. You're definitely not entitled to someone else's body ever. And I think what hurts is that they don't try to do anything about it and build a good, safe community of discussion and support. Instead, they bash the world.
Yeah.
And they let anger fester.
But there's a certain amount of, that's not good to go through puberty with few friends, and a lot of people grow up that way. Puberty is difficult enough as it is. But before we had internet forums, and you could find the other kid in another small town that's having your same experience, and then another kid, and you finally had a global network of people feeling that way that then start to wallow maybe a little bit in this. Now that we have the community and we can see this, and there are people that are radicalizing each other, it's still not an issue where there isn't some sympathy one could have. Right.
And I think an interesting part about this incel community is that it's almost like by being a part of this incel community of 200,000 or 300,000, other male friends out there, you now have all these friends that can relate to you or how you might be feeling.
But if you leave the incel community by having sex with someone,
then you're no longer a part of, they turn on you. So you're almost incentivized to continue down this path of self-destruction just so that you can be a part of a community of hate.
Well, yeah, I was seeing a guy on a Vice documentary about this, and he was doing the interview in his apartment, spending all of his time in his apartment, and the kid was sitting there. I thought he was, a really good-looking kid, really smart, but he was incredibly depressed. He was talking about the number of people on the forum he was going to, and he was sort of, kind of an admin for this forum. And he said that he had known at least 6 suicides of incel forum members that year.
Wow.
So this is not, it's easy to get down on them and sort of counter what they're saying in a flippant manner, but then again, we are talking about people that are depressed and that are not necessarily helping each other be less depressed if they're going to emphasize what some of the more radicalized members, black pill guys, are thinking. It's not helping the guys that are depressed that could use some help.
Right. A sense of community is a really wonderful way to help recover from depression.
Yeah.
And that's why things like Alcoholics Anonymous works.
Exactly.
So I do think there's a place for a type of organization that can facilitate where people are feeling frustrated about their sexual
life, anything.
Yeah, their
right?
sexual life.
Yeah. Well, I think there's something like there are good guys, like Slash are good guys, and the other ones that are, fragments or spin-offs or whatever from this movement. But, we have gotten a lot of publicity for the Incel group lately because of the incident that happened in Toronto, the guy that identified that way and ran into a group of people on the street for that reason, supposedly. And then there's Elliot Rodger in Southern California who had the spree killing situation. And with Elliot, it was really strange because Elliot felt that part of his problem was that he was genetically inferior. He was really quite handsome young fellow, but that's his perception anyway. But he felt that because he was half Asian, that was part of the problem with the Stacys. Although we never spoke to females, but, that was the problem. They weren't throwing themselves at him. And yet the first 3 victims were his 3 Asian roommates that he stabbed to death in his apartment. So we're talking now, people are talking a little bit more about incels now because of these drastic incidents where people have identified as incels, and this made the news, which is not really a great thing when radicalized people make the news for doing bad things, but yet here they are, and they are a pretty large group.
Right. It sort of reminded me a little bit how terrorist organizations work, where they recruit you based on community and based on a higher purpose and a sense of understanding. And it seems like
this is not really a great higher purpose, but most terrorists and radicalized groups aren't really. It's kind of
right.
Fight to turn a bad thing into
the higher
glory.
The higher purpose that incels are promoting is this black pill world where they need to flip the world upside down, almost like that TV show Handmaid's Tale, where men rule and women are like a service that you are granted whenever you want.
And that was supposed to be a novel by Margaret Atwood that's a cautionary tale, not a blueprint.
Yeah, and that's almost like a society and a world where they are looking forward to and expect from the world
or
to hand to them.
fantasize about.
Yeah, or fantasize about. So I drew, when I was learning about the incel community, I drew some parallels between like terrorist culture and mindset and incel community, because they just see the world very differently than other people, and in this case it turns into harmful and drastic actions.
Could you see yourself as, if you stumbled on this community when you were growing up, do you think that would have happened? You would have gotten involved?
I had a really supportive family,
person.
and I had good friends, and I don't think I would ever go down a path of anger and frustration like this. I do remember, I've been 13 and 14 years old as a boy growing up, and I've had fantasies, but never to the point where I felt like I was entitled to a woman's body.
Or anything from anybody, for that
Yeah,
matter.
or anything for that matter.
Okay, we're going to cut away for a second. I think we're at 15 minutes.
Well, Leah, this was a good chat for part 1.
Oh, great. We're going to do this again real soon. Thank you, John.
Of course.